Soft dawn light filtered through the ancient oak boughs before the gates of Wellington Academy, sprinkling the cobblestone path with shimmering ribbons of gold. My heart pounded as the school bus came to a halt before the gleaming blue-green iron gates. Outside, the moss-clad walls and Corinthian columns lent the scene an air of venerable English tradition, just as I had always dreamed of a prestigious private school. A faint jasmine scent drifted on the crisp early autumn air, leaving me both awestruck and uneasy. I stepped down gingerly, clutching my notebook and olive canvas backpack, the only treasures I could call my belongings. My brand-new uniform, prepared by Mrs. Knight, the headmistress, felt stiff on me, a green and white plaid dress, a crisp white blouse, a dark green bow at the collar, and shiny black Oxford shoes. Though I'd practiced wearing it a dozen times, I still feared I looked awkward under the scrutinizing eyes of my classmates. Inside the courtyard, my gaze darted to the right, where Audley Hall loomed like a miniature castle, its deep red tiled roof and soaring arched windows both imposing and magnificent. Uniformed students stood in neat lines before the main gate, some chattering about their big brothers and little sisters. I realized then that I was the new little sister, the poor girl sent from afar to be cared for by the Knight family, home of the eldest son, Alexander. I inhaled deeply, relaxed my shoulders, and approached the welcome desk by the entrance. A kindly teaching assistant, Miss Harper, checked her list, then handed me a slim name tag reading Emily Carter in delicate green script. "Welcome to Wellington Academy, dear Emily," she said in her soft English accent. I offered a shy smile and stammered, "Thank you, Miss Harper." A sudden breeze lifted my hair from my forehead, and for the very first time, I saw him. Alexander Knight stood not far away, clad in the school blazer casually draped over his shoulders, his tie loosely knotted and collar dusted faintly with pollen. Those deep-sea blue eyes of his scanned the grounds with quiet intensity. Tall and angular, his warm brown hair caught the sunrise, flashing threads of copper. His confident, effortless stride exuded an aura of icy calm. My pulse skipped a beat, then raced. In a heartbeat, he passed by without noticing me, his gaze lingering briefly on Miss Harper before drifting onto older students. I forced myself to remember why I was here, a new class, a new life full of uncertainty and challenge. "Emily," Miss Harper reminded me, "your classroom is D204 on the second floor of Building D. Just go through door 204. I nodded, thanked her, and turned awkwardly away. Building D wasn't far, but I paused repeatedly to consult the thin paper map in my hand. The tiled corridor curved gently, portraits of famous teachers and alumni lining the walls. Oil paintings depicted bustling school ceremonies and summer field trips, so vivid they left me both curious and overwhelmed. The distant murmur of footsteps and lively laughter spurred me onward, hoping to remain unnoticed. At door 204, I saw a line of girls peeking and whispering. I gripped the cool doorknob, pushed it gently open, and stepped in. Warm, amber lights mixed with pale daylight through the tall windows. Desks arranged in groups of 3 gleamed as if freshly polished, each bearing a small card with a student's name. I found Emily Carter and slid into the seat by the window, my knees knocking against the desk leg. Before I could settle, the door swung open. Mrs. Wellington, our head teacher, entered with a composed air, her hair in a neat bun and round spectacles perched precisely on her nose. "Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Year 10. I'm Mrs. Wellington, and I'll guide you through this semester." A soft applause rose. Her gaze swept the room, then softened at me. "I see we have a new student. Emily, would you introduce yourself?" I trembled. "Good morning, everyone. I'm Emily Carter. I come from London, and I'm very honored to be here." My voice was small, but the class felt quiet and listening. Murmurs of encouragement warmed me. Mrs. Wellington asked us to open our history textbooks to page 12, the Industrial Revolution. As pages fluttered, I glanced right, and there he was again. Alexander Knight sat in the second row, 2 seats over. He raised his hand, then stood and spoke. The Industrial Revolution, beginning in the late 18th century, transformed the socio-economic landscape with innovations like the steam engine and mechanized textile mills. His rich, measured voice grew animated at steam engine, as though he'd studied it for years. The room hushed, all eyes drawn to him. I listened, heart swelling with admiration. Alexander not only had deep knowledge but could speak with effortless confidence, Just what I longed for. Could I ever catch up to him? Under the soft glow of the lights, I scribbled every word he said, every point Mrs. Wellington made, and every admiring glance from my classmates. The bell rang, echoing through the halls. Books and papers rustled as students gathered their things. I packed slowly, still buzzing from the class. In the corridor, I tried to steady my breath, until a hand touched my shoulder. "Emily, right?" My heart leapt. I turned and saw Alexander himself, his once aloof expression gentler now. He offered a small smile. "I saw you taking notes. If you need any help, just let me know." My cheeks burned. "Oh, thank you so much. I might take you up on that." He nodded, then turned and walked away, leaving behind a quiet warmth. My heart whispered, "This is the beginning of the sweet school day romance I've dreamed of." Thus closed my first day at Wellington Academy, from shy newcomer to a girl with a secret crush on her brilliant, aloof big brother. I vowed to work hard, to learn, and to treasure this moment for all the beautiful years ahead. Tuesday afternoons at Wellington Academy always glowed with the soft gold of the day's last sunlight. When the bell signaled the end of math class, I slipped quietly into a corner of the library, the very spot where I habitually reviewed my notes after school. The library lay at the far end of Building C, removed from the bustling corridor. Inside, towering shelves stood in perfect order, so hushed that I could hear the faintest rustle of pages. Warm halogen lights bathed the antique volumes and the dark mahogany tables in a cozy glow. I felt a wave of relief, as though I found a peaceful refuge amid the busy semester. I set my backpack down and opened my geography notebook, my fingertips trembling with anticipation. Before me, just as vivid as ever, was Alexander Knight, my big brother, strode into the library with a few senior classmates. Since coming to study in Cambridge, I'd rarely seen him at ease. He was normally occupied with perfect grades, the math club, and the school baseball team. But today, his dark green tie was neatly knotted, his blazer casually draped over his shoulders, and his eyes shone with genuine enthusiasm as he paused before the mathematics and logic section. I dared not stare. I hid behind a sheet of practice problems, yet I could still overhear his conversation with Mr. Bradley, the librarian. They stood before a shelf labeled Mathematics and Logic, animatedly debating Fermat's last theorem and its applications in cryptography. Alexander's warm baritone rang clear. If we approach it through group theory, the proof could lead to more efficient RSA algorithms. I listened raptly, sensing the spark in his eyes when he mentioned RSA. Mr. Bradley nodded appreciatively, his round spectacles reflecting pride. "You truly have deep insight, Alexander. Could you explain in more detail the group isomorphism on Zn?" Alexander stepped forward, placing Introduction to Number Theory on the wooden table. On page 287, notice the congruence relation modulo n. I held my breath, picturing his fingers flying across the page. His clear analysis, illustrative examples, and tight logical flow filled me with respect, and with a sudden resolve to borrow that very book. Then I felt someone shift beside me. Startled, I glanced right, and saw Alexander watching me. His brows lifted slightly, and in that moment his gaze felt warm enough to set my cheeks aflame. He smiled briefly, his eyes flicking to my scattered notes, then withdrew. My heart pounded as I stuffed my geography sheet into my notebook. The library seemed to close in around me, the universe reduced to that single shared glance. One small smile had shattered my composure. I took a steadying breath, closed my eyes, and turned my chair so I faced the bookshelf. The mathematics and logic volumes stood just a step away. I rose and crossed the aisle, lifting the dark green covered in Introduction to Number Theory, its corners softly worn. I opened to page 287, determined to read his explanation slowly and copy each formula. A voice whispered at my ear, "Would you like to borrow this?" I jumped back. Alexander stood beside me, arms folded, another book, Advanced Group Theory, tucked under his arm. His brown hair caught the crystal-like library lights. I stammered, "Why yes. I'd like to borrow it to study." He nodded, voice low, "Let me check it out for you. Fill in your name and the due date." My hand shook as I held the pen, turning the checkout slip. He pointed to the blank, "Your name and the return date." I scribbled, "Emily Carter, 10/10." He added, "Read every section carefully." If you need more explanation, come to my desk after class. I smiled gratefully. Thank you so much. He inclined his head and walked away, leaving me clutching Introduction to Number Theory, my heart racing. The once silent library felt alive with possibility, me, the book, and the echo of his presence. I returned to my table, settling into the familiar corner. The book felt like a precious gift in my hands. I turned the pages, eyes bright with determination. I will master this, I promised myself. I glanced toward the library door, hoping he might reappear, but only the halogen lights and empty shelves greeted me. Time passed slowly. Just as dusk threatened to overtake the windows, the rear door creaked open, signaling closing time. I leapt up, grabbed my bag, and heard his voice. Emily, are you ready to go? I turned to see Alexander holding a tote bag. I saw you here. On Sundays the library closes early, let's head out. I nodded, and we walked the patterned corridor together. The autumn breeze drifted through open windows, scattering golden leaves across my hair. Alexander steered me toward the courtyard. How did you find the number theory today? He asked, hands in his blazer pockets. I blushed. Challenging, but very interesting. You explain it so clearly. He waved his hand modestly. It's just my forte. Have you finished your library review? I nodded. Yes. I'll keep working at it. A hush fell as our footsteps echoed. I looked up and met his deep gaze, feeling a warm certainty. I am so lucky to have him by my side. His eyes, still inscrutable, held just enough openness to let me in. At the stairway down to the courtyard, he paused with a soft smile. Next week, if you need more help with math, just let me know. I nodded eagerly, eyes shining. I will. Thank you, Alexander. He dipped his head in farewell, then veered off toward the upper-class dormitories. I watched his confident stride fade into the shadows, my heart full. Today the library had been more than a place of study, it was where my schoolgirl crush first sprouted. Illuminated by warm light and silent shelves, I vowed to work hard and cherish every step he took beside me. It was literature period that day, and Class 10A2 was discussing Hui Can's poem Autumn's Call. Morning sunlight slanted through the windows, casting strange patterns of light upon the desks. I sat in the second seat of the left row, my usual spot, with my poetry analysis book in hand. Mrs. Stevenson had just explained the meaning of the line yellow leaves tilting at the mountain's edge, then scanned the room and rested her gaze on Emily Carter, my little sister by adoption, who sat alone in the outermost right row. I noticed her nervousness immediately. Her handwriting was neat, but on closer glance I saw messy smudges of ink and worried eyes, signs she was struggling to keep up with the class's analysis. Of course, she was new to Wellington and unfamiliar with our style of discussion. I felt an urge to help her. When Mrs. Stevenson asked, would anyone like to share their interpretation of this stanza? The class erupted in raised hands. I thought, if I volunteered, Emily could hear my clear explanation and gain confidence. I raised my hand and smiled at Mrs. Stevenson. Alexander, would you like to present? She prompted. I stood, walked down the center aisle with my usual poise, and opened my book. The scrape of chairs and rustle of pages quieted the room. I spoke. The opening line, memories weigh so heavy from long ago, evokes the traveler pause amid the autumn woods, feeling each falling leaf. The poet's use of tilting emphasizes the fragility of those yellow leaves, mirroring how easily the human heart wavers before life's changes. In the next line, my heart trembles in the autumn breeze. We see a poignant emotion, a sadness not just drawn from nature but from within ourselves, as we confront life's impermanence through the lens of the falling leaves. Each word was not only an expression of solid understanding but also a careful guide, leading my classmates into the poet's world. When I finished, I bowed slightly and returned to my seat as polite applause broke out. I scanned the room for Emily and saw admiration shining in her eyes, an instant of pure joy. The bell rang, and classmates filed out to the courtyard. I gathered my bag and approached Emily, who was gathering her notebooks at the back. Emily, do you have any questions about the poem? I asked quietly. She looked up, flustered. I didn't quite understand the line heart trembles in the autumn breeze. Could you explain it again? I smiled. Of course. When your heart trembles, it means you're empathizing with the transformation, not only the external change of leaves falling but also the inner shift of the soul. The autumn wind acts as a catalyst, stirring memories and emotions. She nodded gratefully, her eyes soft. Would you like to summarize it together? I offered. She agreed, and within minutes I sketched a concise outline in her notebook. By recess, we had finished. I packed my notebooks and we stepped into the lively hallway, filled with chattering friends and sunlight splashed across brick walls. Thank you, Alexander, Emily said, cheeks dusted pink. You are welcome, I replied. If you ever need more help, just let me know. The courtyard by the library was quieter now. I suggested, the library's open, shall we study there some more? Emily hesitated, then smiled. Yes, please. Inside the hushed stacks, I led her to a corner table where we first bonded over number theory. This time, we tackled literature. I opened selected poems to the very stanza we discussed, explaining its grammar and poetic devices. Emily jotted down notes, glancing up at me with trusting eyes. I thought, I must help her grow confident. When our session ended, the afternoon light waned and the librarians began closing. I reminded her, let's meet again for math next week. After your club meeting, find me in the courtyard. Emily beamed. I will. Thanks, Alexander. I nodded and headed off to my own dorm wing. She lingered, watching me go. I felt proud to be her mentor, and more than that, her friend. That evening, back in the night mansion's study, Father greeted me with a steaming cup of oolong tea. He smiled. I'm glad to see you and Emily studying together, he said. Guide her, but also encourage her independence. I will, I promised. As the sunset painted my study window rose gold, I reflected on our day. What began as a responsibility, looking after my adopted sister, had blossomed into genuine care. Our shared lessons had quietly woven our hearts together, forging a bond beyond mere obligation. I closed my planner, determined I would walk beside Emily through every challenge, ensuring her success, and in the process, discovering my own capacity to love beyond duty. That day's biology class was held in the ground floor laboratory of Building B, its pristine white walls gleaming under fluorescent lights and rows of shining apparatus. I entered still buzzing from yesterday's literature review with Alexander in the library. The soft clink of glassware and the sterile scent of 70% ethanol made me feel both excited and slightly dizzy. It had been ages since I'd felt so confident in a lab, thanks to having my big brother by my side, I told myself. Our instructor, Ms. Carter, no relation, just a coincidence in names, was an American teacher from Boston. She wore a crisp white lab coat, her hair neatly pinned up, and her bright eyes conveyed both warmth and precision. She greeted us. Good afternoon, students. Today's practical, extracting chlorophyll from spinach leaves and observing chloroplast structures under the microscope. I quietly jotted down her key points: prepare an 80% ethanol solution, shake the test tube gently at about 50 degrees Celsius, filter carefully, then mount the extract on a slide. Though the protocol was long and detailed, I reminded myself, I've studied this already, I won't make any mistakes. When she distributed the experiment kits, my group of 3 gravitated to the bench by the window, where sunlight slanted across the tabletop. Test tubes, pipettes, graduated cylinders, and fresh spinach leaves were neatly arranged. I carefully dried a test tube, donned gloves and safety goggles, and felt strangely professional, as if I were already a lab tech. My lab partners chatted softly, but I stayed focused on my notebook. So focused, in fact, that I didn't notice Alexander approaching until Miss Carter called out, Emily, could you pass me that mortar and pestle, please? Startled, I looked up to see him holding the mortar and pestle we needed. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his top 2 buttons undone, and under the warm morning light his sharp features looked almost sculpted. My heart raced, but I forced a calm nod and handed them to Miss Carter. As he turned to leave, he paused beside my bench and said, Remember to mix the ethanol at the right ratio. For best chlorophyll extraction, keep the tube around 45 to 50 degrees Celsius. I nodded, grateful. Yes, thank you, you really read the protocol. We ground the spinach in the mortar together, shook the mixture in the test tube, and watched the liquid turn deep green, proof the chlorophyll had dissolved. Every step felt precise, unlike past sessions where a single slip ruined my results. In my mind I thought, if you hadn't guided me, I'd have fumbled. But then came the filter step. As I poured the mixture through the filter paper, my hand slipped and a drop splattered onto the white bench tray. I panicked, trying to catch the runaway test tube, only to knock others over. A loud clatter of glass echoed, solution splashed across my lab coat and notebook. My face drained of color. So embarrassing. I thought as classmates glanced over, some frowning, some smirking. Then I heard that familiar warm voice behind me. "Stay still." I spun around. Alexander had already produced a small pack of tissues. He always carried one, along with pens and utensils, in his blazer pocket. He knelt beside me, gently dabbing the spilled liquid off the bench. Then he looked at the stain on my coat and asked quietly, "Your coat's stained. Let me help." I stammered, "No, it's okay, please." But he brushed aside my protest and used the tissues and a bit of cleaning solution he pulled from his pocket to lift the green spots. As he worked, he asked, "How long have you been here?" My voice shook. "Just a month, Alexander." He nodded thoughtfully as he cleaned. "I'll take care of this. Don't worry." I hardly heard Ms. Carter calling grooves to the microscopes. All I noticed was Alexander's calm care, his deliberate strokes removing the stain. I wanted to thank him properly, but could only manage. "Thank you." He smiled without a hint of reprimand, put away the tissues, and helped me write the test tubes. Then he returned to his own group's lab work, leaving me sitting on a stool, watching the back of his blazer. A buzz from my phone snapped me back. I'd almost missed the moment to mount the extract. I fumbled with the slide until Alexander reappeared, placing a hand gently on my shoulder. "Here, let me set it on the stage. Adjust the lens, and you'll see." He guided my hands as I loaded the slide. Under the microscope, a world of tiny green discs shimmered, chloroplasts floating like miniature leaves. He leaned in, eyes bright with excitement, then looked up at me with a tender warmth. "Isn't it beautiful?" I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. "It really is. I've never seen it so clearly." He stepped back and let me look. For the first time, biology felt magical, not just formulas or protocols, but discovery fostered in a safe, encouraging space he had created. The bell rang, signaling the end of class. As I gathered slides and glassware, I looked around for him. He was already at the door, blazer slung over his shoulder, waiting. He smiled and said, "Well done today. If your coat still needs cleaning, borrow a fresh lab coat from dorm services. And remember, mistakes happen, but you know how to fix them." I beamed at him. "I will. Thank you again." He reached out, gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze, and we walked down the softly lit corridor together. The late afternoon light filtered through the windows, stirring the last golden leaves on the oaks. I knew in my heart, this sweet moment, his caring kindness, would forever shine in my school day memories. That Christmas, a cold stillness lay over the oaks before the night estate. It was my first holiday away from home, and excitement mingled with homesickness. Early one morning, the season's first snow silently blanketed the red tile roofs, transforming the grounds into a fleeting winter wonderland. Wrapped in layers, 3 scarves, a navy cashmere coat supplied by Alexander just the day before, I made my way across the ornate stone drive. Inside the grand hall, a 6-member choir of upperclassmen dressed in jade robes softly sang Silent Night. Centered beneath a colossal Christmas tree hung golden lights and ruby glass ornaments. The crackling hearth smelled of pine, mingled with citrus and cinnamon. Garland draped the walls, white candles flickered on every surface, and the whole scene felt both stately and intimate. My heart raced when I realized Alexander had arranged it all. The choir fell silent and every eye turned to me. "Merry Christmas, Emily." They called in unison as applause erupted. Tears pricked my eyes. Alexander appeared behind me in his dark green blazer and matching scarf, carrying a delicate carved frame depicting falling snow. "I know you miss home," he whispered. "So I wanted to bring Christmas here for you." I spun to him, stunned. "You did this?" He nodded proudly. "This is your first Christmas here. I wanted you to feel warm." I hugged him tight, tears flowing. I'm so happy. Thank you. We shared carrot cake, hot chocolate, and peppermint canes by the fireside. Later, he led me into the garden to watch festive lights swirling around the gazebo. Though I ached for my family, I felt truly at home, with him by my side. I began planning this celebration nearly a month ago. Knowing Emily would spend Christmas alone, I resolved to transform the estate into her haven. I ordered her favorite ingredients: mashed potatoes, fig pudding, gingerbread, from London and Scotland, arranged for the choir, and enlisted Miss Carter and Miss Harper to help decorate the Great Hall. This morning, I rose before dawn. The chef prepared fruitcake and spiced apple pastries, the tea steward arranged kettles of hot brew. I tested the sound system, adjusted the lighting, and placed gift boxes, each tied with ribbon, at every dining chair. An hour before Emily descended, I hid behind a pillar to watch her reaction. When she appeared at the top of the stairs, her astonished eyes became my reward. As the choir began, I stepped forward, signaling them to pause. I took her hand and placed the snow scene frame in her palms. "Do you like it?" I asked. She smiled through tears. "You did all this? I wanted you to feel at home." She hugged me fiercely. In that moment, I vowed, this Christmas, I would protect her and show her my deepest care. The party slipped by like a dream. When the final carol ended, the choir departed, and we lingered by the hearth. Alexander reached into his jacket pocket and drew out a small wooden box, my Christmas gift, a silver necklace shaped like a pine sprig, set with a tiny turquoise gem. He fastened it around my neck and whispered, "Merry Christmas, my little sister." My cheeks flushed as he bent closer. "But I want you to know, you're more than just my little sister." Before I could respond, he pressed a soft kiss to my lips. My heart soared, and I knew this Christmas would forever mark the beginning of something new in our shared story. Wellington's Spring Festival was the year's most anticipated event. The quad's emerald lawn was strewn with lanterns in every hue, food stalls offered pudding, candy canes, and fruit teas, there were ring toss booths, archery stands, and puzzle tables. Student groups had stayed up all night to hang decorations, arrange seating, and rehearse performances. I, as a member of the Arts Committee, rushed from rehearsal to the library for last-minute script changes, eager to shine on the big stage, especially since Alexander had recommended me for the group. As dusk fell and lanterns glowed, I donned my cream-colored shawl and gripped my script. My heart pounded. It was my first central performance. A hush fell when the MC announced, and I stepped onto the small wooden stage. Under the spotlight, I read each line of Spring's promise with trembling voice, but I gave it my all. When I finished, thunderous applause erupted. I bowed, then searched the crowd for Alexander, but he was nowhere to be seen. Disappointed, I slipped backstage, only to spot him among a cluster of seniors around Isabella Matthews, the elegant senior class president, known for her charm. Alexander stood close, smiling and leaning in as they spoke and laughed. My chest tightened. What was he saying? Did he forget me already? I tried to calm myself, reminding that perhaps he was just congratulating Isabella on organizing the event. Then Isabella turned and waved at me. "Emily. Amazing performance." Alexander was just telling me how impressed he was. I forced a small smile. "Thank you." But my heart stung as I backed into the shadows, wiping away tears. I retraced my steps through the maze of stalls, the sugar dust scent of pudding gone bland. Under the softly glowing lanterns, I resolved, if he's busy with Isabella, I won't bother him anymore. For the next week, I avoided him. I skipped our math sessions in the library and ignored his texts. "Emily, are you okay? Can we talk?" I didn't reply. Friends worried, but I told them I was fine, though every corner of campus felt empty without him. Finally, one afternoon beneath the cherry trees by the library, I sat sketching petals when he quietly joined me, concern in his eyes. He waited until I spoke. "I'm sorry I misunderstood," I choked out. He exhaled, relief flooding his face. I wasn't talking to Isabella like that. I was arranging for her to use the microphone. You were too far away to hear." Tears blurred my sight. "I'm sorry I was jealous." He smiled softly. "I know you tried to hide it, but I was worried. You matter to me, far more than just a little sister." I sobbed and threw my arms around him. The gentle rustle of petals seemed to congratulate us as, beneath the cherry blossoms, our hearts found each other again. A week after the spring festival, Wellington Academy's rhythms returned to normal: bells, books, and crowded hallways. Yet for me, Alexander Knight, an invisible weight clung to every moment, the silence between Emily and me. That morning, I breakfasted with my parents in the dining hall, avoiding the empty chair where she once sat. I forced down toast, wondering, had I truly resolved her doubts? Though she'd apologized under the cherry tree, I still felt a pang each time I passed the library without seeing her there. After breakfast, I searched the library first, calling her name. The familiar corner where she used to study remained empty, only the soft hum of the projector and the rustle of pages. My throat tightened. At recess, I found her in the courtyard, hunched over the flower beds by the snack stand. I approached and gently touched her shoulder. "Emily, why are you avoiding me?" She stood abruptly and turned away. My heart sank. "Please talk to me." She paused at the archery booth. "Are you trying to trap me?" she asked quietly. I shook my head. "No. I'm worried about you, and I want to help you learn more easily." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "Did you transfer me so I couldn't avoid you?" I felt a surge of resolve. I had made the request to the principal, to move her into my class, believing that proximity would help her. Yet now it seemed like coercion. "I asked because I care about you," I said earnestly. "I want to be there for you." Her shoulders relaxed and she whispered, "I'm sorry I shut you out." I took her hand. "You don't have to apologize. Let's keep trying, together." That evening, back in my study, I recorded in my planner, 07/12, Emily's class transfer approved. Begin 4 weekly math sessions. Now to rebuild her trust. Outside my window, campus lights began to twinkle. I smiled, determined. Our silence had been broken, and though the road ahead would require patience, we would walk it side by side, no longer as distant siblings, but as partners in both study and heart. That night in the dormitory was hushed as velvet, broken only by the slant of hallway light across my window. After the spring festival misunderstanding and our reconciliation beneath the cherry tree, my heart still fluttered whenever I recalled Alexander's caring gaze. Yet big brother and little sister were such comfortable roles, how could I risk altering them? I decided to pour my feelings into a letter. At my desk, alongside my English dictionaries and a volume of Swandew's poems, I lit a small lamp and wrote the date atop a blank page, December 12, Cambridge winter. Dear Alexander, today in the library I passed by the math shelves, where you first guided me through theorems, and I remembered the bench by the quad where you quietly beckoned me to sit beside you. I've tried to ignore the warmth I feel when you explain each formula, but these moments have etched themselves on my heart. I am not the fragile girl I once was. Through your help, I've grown confident in my studies and in life. Yet I fear confessing my feelings might rift the precious bond we share. I do not ask for more than you can give, only that you know how deeply I cherish every second at your side. Please do not feel you must reply. I only needed you to understand that my heart has long since belonged to you. If this is a mistake, I will learn to let go, but at least I will have been brave. Thank you for all you've done for me, my dearest Alexander. Yours always, Emily Carter. Tears blurred my ink as I folded the letter and slipped it into a cream envelope marked for Alexander. Just then, there was a soft knock. Ms. Harper stood in the doorway, concerned. "Emily, are you still up? Have you finished your literature essay? There's a poetry competition Sunday, you should try." I stashed my notebook and let her beneath the desk. "Thank you, Ms. Harper. I'm almost done." She offered a gentle smile. "Don't overwork yourself." When she left, I retrieved the envelope and hesitated. I couldn't bear to hand it to him, and equally dreaded destroying it. Finally, I tucked the letter into the front of my journal, a secret I alone would keep. That night, I slept with a lighter heart. I had dared to write the truth, even if no one else would ever know. Late afternoon light warmed the second-floor study, where I arrived early to prepare notes for our upcoming math session. I laid out advanced calculus and linear algebra, then checked my messages, only to see a notice from the library desk. "Alexander, A notebook and envelope addressed to you are on the table by the window. Curious, I crossed to the corner where Emily often sat. There lay my tan notebook and, beside it, a cream-colored envelope marked for Alexander. My heart pounded as I slid it open. Inside was Emily's neat handwriting. Dear Alexander. Reading her confession, memories of shared study sessions, her fear of changing our relationship, her silent love, I felt a rush of both sorrow and joy. I thought of every time I'd guided her through problems, every gentle look I'd offered. How blind I'd been not to see the depth of her heart. Folding the letter, I found behind it her journal in which she'd stowed it. On the next pages were her math and literature notes, evidence that she never let her feelings impede her studies. My own emotions overwhelmed me. I tucked the letter into my blazer pocket and hurried out. I searched first the library, but her usual corner was empty. At the quad, beneath the broad elms, I finally spotted her by the sculpture of Athena, head bowed, hands clasped in her lap. I approached softly. Emily, I said, voice unsteady. She looked up, startled. I held out the envelope. I read your letter. Her eyes flooded with tears as I continued, thank you for trusting me. I am so sorry I didn't notice sooner. She rose, voice trembling, Alexander. I stepped forward, clasped her hands in mine. I have loved you, more than a sister, for a long time. I was afraid to hurt you, afraid to lose what we have. She searched my face, then threw her arms around me, tears of relief and joy mingling. I held her close and whispered, let me show you, with every day we have, how much you mean to me. Beneath the glowing window panes, our long-hidden truth finally stood in the light. Each year the Spring Festival celebrated new beginnings, the quad's green lawn strewn with lanterns, food stalls brimming with pudding and candy canes, archery and ring toss games. Cherry blossoms fluttered like confetti. I arrived early in cream and seafoam green, my heart racing with excitement, not least because Alexander had arranged my spot on the arts committee. When it was our troop's turn, I stepped onto the stage under the glass canopy and recited our poem, Spring Knocks on the Heart. My voice, though nervous at first, grew strong as I invoked blooming flowers and whispered hopes. The crowd erupted in cheers. I bowed, intent on finding Alexander, but he was nowhere to be seen. Downstage, I spied Isabella Matthews, radiant in her dance team costume, and nearby Alexander, his arm around her waist, laughing as she rehearsed her lines. My hope curdled into hurt. Was he celebrating his event partner rather than me? Isabella caught my eye and called, Emily. Great recitation. Alexander said your imagery was enchanting. I managed a stiff smile and slipped away, ducking behind crimson curtains. Tears stung as I navigated the labyrinth of stalls, the scent of sugar and spring air tasting bitter. I resolved, if he's busy with her, I won't interrupt. For days I hid in my room and in the art studio, ignoring his texts, Emily, please talk to me, and skipping our study dates. Yet each corner of campus reminded me of his kindness, the library, the lab, the window seat table. Finally, beneath the blossoming cherry tree by the library, I found the courage to face him. He approached slowly, eyes full of concern. I'm sorry, I whispered. I misjudged you. His sigh lifted years of worry. I never meant to hurt you. I was helping Isabella with her microphone, never with you in mind. Please don't doubt my care for you. Tears slid down my cheeks. I was jealous. He took my hand and brushed away my tears. I love you, always have. Nothing and no one will ever change that. Under pink petals drifting down, I buried my face against his chest, safe at last in the truth we both shared. The first Monday after the Spring Festival felt charged with new promise. As I stepped into Class 10A2, the early spring air carried the faint scent of blossoms, and for the first time I truly looked forward to math lessons, because Alexander would be at my side. He greeted me at the door with that warm smile that made my heart flutter. During the lesson on quadratic equations, I raised my hand nervously. He leaned in and whispered, remember, plus or minus b squared 4 acres, over 2a. His tone was patient, his eyes encouraging. When I solved the problem on the board, the class applauded, and I realized I wasn't just a struggling newcomer anymore, I was Alexander's study partner. At recess, we strolled beneath the pale green leaves, mapping out our week. I told him about the upcoming poetry competition. He promised to review my verses. In return, I quizzed him on geometry theorems. We laughed when I tangled up theorems, and he teased me into getting them right. That afternoon, in the library's back corner, we tackled literature. He read my analysis of Hamlet. I offered him watercolor sketches of the school courtyard. When the librarian called closing time, neither of us moved. Only when he gently closed my notebook did I realize how safe I felt beside him. Watching Emily flourish fills me with pride. No longer the timid girl who first arrived clutching her notebook, she now participates with confidence. After school, I often linger to help her at the whiteboard or guide her through essay edits. Each thank you she offers is a spark that lights my own heart. Last week, Mother invited Emily to tea with some alumni. I worried she'd feel out of place, but Emily charmed them with her thoughtful questions and genuine warmth. Seeing her composed in that drawing room reminded me how far she's come, and how committed I am to supporting her growth. As spring deepens, so does our bond. We've joined the campus art club and started a weekend chemistry project together. Every shared victory, no matter how small, becomes a memory I treasure. And I know that, whatever challenges come, we will face them side by side. Early summer brought bittersweet news. Emily had earned a spot in Harvard's prestigious summer library program, and I had been invited to assist with a Cambridge AI workshop. Our joy at each other's achievements was tinged with the prospect of weeks apart, and neither of us wanted to let go. On the morning she left for Boston, we met at Heathrow. The airport smelled of coffee and departure announcements. Emily's eyes were bright with excitement, but as we hugged, her voice cracked. "Promise me we'll video call every night?" "I promise," I whispered. I tried to sound confident, but inside I was apprehensive. Would distance dull the closeness we'd built? Through the long days of workshop meetings and late-night coding sessions, I thought of her laughter under Cambridge's cherry trees. Each evening, I watched her face on my laptop screen, her room a collage of maps and books. She described Boston's ancient libraries and new friends. I shared breakthroughs in lecture demos. Those nightly calls became our anchor. Then came a small package, a hand-woven bookmark she'd made, threaded with green and white ribbon, the school colors. Attached was a note, "So you remember Wellington when you read your code." I pressed it to my heart. In that moment, I understood, true growth sometimes requires time apart, trusting that love endures distance. Autumn found me back in Cambridge for graduate studies. The golden leaves danced across the quad as I walked toward the Senate House for my master's ceremony. Dressed in a gown and cap, I felt a swirl of pride and nostalgia. 20 months ago I was the shy scholarship student he guided, now I was a confident scholar in my own right. In the crowd of graduates, I caught sight of Alexander approaching with a single white rose. My heart leapt as he knelt before me on the stone steps. In his hand shimmered a slender silver ring. "Emily Carter," he said, voice unsteady with emotion, "will you continue this journey with me as my fiancé?" Tears sprung to my eyes. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto my finger. Around us, cheering students waved hats overhead. I threw my arms around him, overwhelmed by joy. That evening, we returned to the courtyard where we first studied together. Beneath the amber glow of lampposts, we talked of future dreams, new degrees, travel, perhaps a little library of our own someday. With every vow we made, I felt the strength of our shared past and the promise of our life ahead.